Hello and welcome finally to my top 10 films of 2023. I know this video should have been out a couple days ago, and I have not seen a lot of the great films of this year, or of last year I guess, but I am still going to give you my top 10. I'm sure Poor Things would probably be on there, and Ferrari might even be on there, but I'm going to tell you what's on my list now. So there are going to be, I think, one or two honorable mentions before I get this thing started, just because I couldn't fit all of my favorite films into this list, which I'm very happy to say, because this was an excellent year in the cinemas. Just so many great films coming out consistently throughout the months, and ending strong with December. I'm just really happy with the output of films this year. This is probably the best year of film I'll live through for quite a while, because 2024 is looking bleak. But not to get hung up on that, here are my honorable mentions. Starting off this honorable mention section, I have to credit Creed 3 as being an excellent addition to the Creed and Rocky franchise. I had not seen any of the Creeds or Rockies prior to this year, and kind of out of nowhere I just got on a Rocky kick. And I figured I might as well watch the Creed films, expecting really nothing excellent, just expecting more movies on the same tier as Rocky 3 or 4. And what I got from the Creed movies was something incredible. I think the first Creed is pretty easily on par with the first Rocky. Creed 2 feels a lot more like Rocky 4 than I'd like it to. But Creed 3 really stands out in my head as being Michael B. Jordan's directorial, not masterpiece, but just an excellent piece of directing work from him. He brings a lot of personality and character that really only he could bring. You know, he's a younger, experienced actor, and he clearly watches a lot of anime, and in those interviews when he said, I want to make this movie feel like an anime, he really does transcribe it onto screen pretty well, because you see all these kind of anime tropes, and even just the character of Darius, I think his name was, is just an old school friend, and you see all this guilt in Adonis's heart. And it really does feel like an anime, and especially in that final fight where everyone disappears and it's just dukes and they're just fighting it out. It just feels so cool, and Michael B. Jordan's influence on this movie is definitely what makes it stand out. Because if it was directed by pretty much anyone else, I don't think this movie would have really been memorable at all. I have to also appreciate the music in this film. J. Cole, the song he made for this movie is really great. I really enjoyed all the acting performances. The cinematography was pretty basic, but in the fighting scenes, I think it was pretty impressive. Jonathan Majors, even though he's a horrible guy, his acting was pretty solid. I just really enjoyed this movie, and it has this aura to it that you really only get from a boxing movie of this tier. And if you want to find a good boxing movie, you put on a Rocky or a Creed, and this is not one that you'd regret putting on, like maybe Rocky 4 or Creed 2. But yeah, on to the next honorable mention.
Hi. What's your name?
Priscilla.
You like Elvis Presley?
And now for my second honorable mention, I have to throw some very well-deserved appreciation towards Sofia Coppola for her film this year, Priscilla. Obviously a biopic about Priscilla Presley. I went into this movie knowing pretty much nothing about Priscilla Presley or her story or anything like that. And watching it, I know Elvis is a very popular musician, but I mean, marrying a girl at, what was it, like 13 or 16 or something, is still really gross and creepy. And just watching the film from her perspective gives a really unique view on the whole thing, because from her angle, at that age, it was like a dream come true for her. And you see the wariness and kind of uneasiness from her parents, and you relate to that, but you also relate to that like childlike wonder and just pure happiness that you see from Priscilla's perspective, and it gives the film a really interesting angle to play from. The music is mainly old Elvis hits, but as someone who hasn't really listened to much Elvis at all, I really appreciated just hearing Elvis's music in that context. It really made the music feel more personal. And obviously, because it's Sofia Coppola, I really trust her. I've seen Lost in Translation, and I really like that movie. I was expecting a technical show, and by God, I got it from Priscilla. I'm thinking back to that scene specifically where it's the summer, and she's taking pictures from an old camera, and you see the setting through that old camera, and it just makes for a really great framing device, and it makes the film feel so much more personal because it's literally from Priscilla's perspective in that scenario. And to complement the movie even more, the performances from everyone, Jacob Elordi especially, was just unbelievable. He plays such a great, slightly wicked, but also clearly caring man, especially in that first kind of quarter or even half of the movie. The performance from Priscilla's actress, I'm forgetting her name, but she was also amazing in this film. I just really enjoyed Priscilla. It was something I didn't really go into expecting much. I just wanted to see it because of a Sofia Coppola film, and I'm very happy I did because this movie, even though it couldn't make it onto my personal top 10, was still very great. And now finally onto my number 10 position.
You're not here.
We're not there. The car exploded.
And now, starting off my list at the number 10 spot, I have Asteroid City, directed by Wes Anderson. I've seen quite a few Wes Anderson films, and I went into this movie expecting pretty much his best. I remember when this movie was still in test screenings, I remember seeing a lot of buzz about it on Twitter, and people saying it's Wes Anderson's best pretty easily. And I still really enjoyed the film, but I do not think it's his best, like even close. I think Grand Budapest Hotel still absolutely knocks this film out of the water, but nonetheless, I still enjoyed Asteroid City. This film has that quirkiness that you expect from a Wes Anderson movie, and he manages to have multiple main characters, or at least very important characters. I swear this is one of the biggest casts I've ever seen in a movie, and he manages to play all of their little sub-stories pretty well. I'm thinking of all these little side stories, and I can't help but realize that Wes Anderson really knew what he was doing. And not only does he balance this play really well, but he balances the real-life black and white stuff really well, and I actually think that's the best part of the movie. I enjoyed the play itself, I enjoyed the look of the movie. He managed to make everything in the Asteroid City play actually look like a set you'd see on a stage. But there are just so many great scenes with Adrian Brody in the real world, in these beautiful black and white sets that Wes Anderson has set up. I just really enjoyed, visually, the entire style of this movie, both in and out of the Asteroid City play. This movie just has so much charm and quirk and just joy to it. I can't really explain it with more than just that word. It is just so cheery and so happy all the time. There's really never a dull moment in this film, and it manages to be consistently funny throughout its entire runtime. And again, trust me, I would say much more about this film if I had the time, but I gotta keep this video under 30 minutes. So yeah, on to my number 9 spot. Falling into my number 9 spot, I have Dream Scenario, directed by Christopher Borgli. I already have a video on why I like Dream Scenario so much, but just to summarize, I really enjoyed this film. I thought the concept was fascinating. Nicolas Cage is pretty much the perfect actor for a movie like this. When you give him a good script, that guy just goes so off the rails in such a good way that you can't help but just watch the train wreck character that he ends up playing almost every time. This movie was funny, this movie was almost scary a couple times, this movie was interesting, and you really do feel for Nick Cage's character, because anyone can relate to just being dropped in something that they really have nothing to do with, and facing the consequences of it. That's happened to you at some point in your life, and watching Nick Cage's character handle it so poorly that he gets ostracized from pretty much anywhere he goes was just great. Just watching this poor, normal dude fall, this biologist just completely ruin his career with something that he really couldn't control, was just so great to watch. And again, the soundtrack and the editing and the special effects, everything that has to do with the actual dreams in this movie, as silly as it sounds, was just so much fun to watch and so interesting. And again, I hate to say it, but Nick Cage is just such a great actor for a role like this. He plays that washed 40-something character so well. I mean, I can't say much more about this movie. I think it's a standout A24 film from this year, in a year where there were a lot of standout A24 films. I just really enjoyed this one. I think more movies need to be made like this, specifically like this, in the sense that you take a pretty basic concept and you just stretch it out into a great film. It seems so simple from an insider's perspective. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. But I mean, just watching it, I think a lot more great movies could be made like this, and I would definitely be seated for it. But yeah, I really like Dream Scenario, and now on to my number 8 spot.
I find music a useful distraction. A focus tool. Keeps the inner voice from wandering.
At number 8, it pains me to put it this low, but I have David Fincher's The Killer. I remember being very excited for this film when it was first announced because I love David Fincher's work. At least 3 of his movies are in my top 10 of all time, or at least in my top 15. He is just such an inspirational and powerful director, and when The Killer was announced and I just saw how the movie looked, and I just got the general idea of what it would probably be about, I was so excited to see this film. And first, I couldn't see it in theaters, which broke my heart. I had to watch it on Netflix. And second off, this movie is so close to being great, but it's just barely off enough to completely throw me off from really getting into it. I really wanted to love this film, and I saw little similarities between this film and other David Fincher movies, but that kind of core element that he captures in Gone Girl and The Social Network and Zodiac, he just can't really capture it in the story, and as a result, the movie feels kind of hollow and one-noted. Mainly, Michael Fassbender's character is so just basic and one-noted, and he doesn't really change at all through the film. There's that base motivation for him, and that's okay, but I think they could have gone so much further with his character, and with his arc, and even with his profession of killing people. I just wish this movie was better. Again, I see so much potential in this idea for a film, and the film does still rock. I still loved watching it, and I was still sitting there doing backflips on my couch at each little gunshot and at each little sneaking around scene. But I just really wish this movie was better. It's an assassination flick set in modern day, and I feel like it's just such an underutilized idea, because most assassination flicks take place back in time. And, I do like the bits in this movie when he uses the technology to his advantage. That's the best part of the movie. But everything else about this movie just kind of falls flat, and it breaks my heart that it does. But yeah, I wish this movie was better, but I still really liked it. And now on to my number 7 spot.
There's a word in Korean, 인연. It means providence or fate.
Do you believe in that?
That's just something Koreans say to seduce someone.
Coming in at my 7th place spot, I have Past Lives, directed by Celine Song. I went into this movie completely blind. I had really no expectations for it. I just knew it was a romantic movie and that Guillermo del Toro really liked it. So I went in kind of hoping just for a really good movie, and I came out with a really good movie. I really didn't love it as much as I think I should have. As weird as it sounds, this movie is getting a bunch of praise from pretty much everyone, and the movie is great, and I did love watching the movie, but I don't think it was that good. Not to say that this movie isn't great, because it is, and a lot of that is to be attributed to this first-time director, Celine Song, who blew it out of the water, and these actors that I've never seen before, mainly Greta Lee and Teo Yoo. They're both actors that I have never seen before perform, and they absolutely sell their roles as these old, kind of destined to meet again friends. And I think that's where the movie really hits its stride, when there are those moments after they meet up, when they're just kind of unsure as to what position they're really in, as in knowing each other. It's just this really great awkwardness that you can't fake, but they fake it so well. And even before that, one of the things about this movie that I like so much is that it takes its time setting up this relationship. For like the first 30 minutes, I want to say, it's just them when they were kids, and then when they were teenagers, just FaceTiming all the time. And you see their relationship kind of organically grow, and it makes sense. And when you see them completely split paths, and like in that very subtle visual imagery when they're walking away from each other back home, you see them completely splitting, and then when they end up meeting up again, it's almost like a car crash, you know? It's like this wasn't supposed to happen, and when it does, you see her almost fumble her current husband just to be with him. And that final scene where she's walking back and crying just felt so powerful and just felt so emotionally charged. And that's why I love this movie so much. It's just so, again, emotionally, this movie just radiates that energy. And when you watch this movie, you completely understand every emotion going through Greta Lee's head and going through Teo Yu's head. That's why this movie's so great, and that's why it's being praised so much. And obviously, too, the visuals are really beautiful. This movie visually is very impressive. But yeah, I've been talking for too long now. On to my number 6 pick.
Sir, I don't understand.
That's glaringly apparent.
I can't fail this class.
In my number 6 spot, I have The Holdovers, directed by Alexander Payne. Just like Dream Scenario, I have a video explaining why I like this movie so much, but just to kind of summarize it again, this movie works as well as it does because it is a very low-stakes, kind of basic story, but the acting from Paul Giamatti and this kid who has literally never been in another role is just so quality, and the way their relationship kind of forms around this weird situation they've both been thrown into feels so realistic, and it's so enjoyable to watch that you can't help but just be locked in. And then it gets even more interesting when you learn more about these characters, like Paul Giamatti's character's weird backstory, and it's all just so emotionally powerful, and a lot like Past Lives, it gets you almost to that teary-eyed spot. I'm thinking mainly of the end of the movie, which I won't spoil, but I mean, that moment from Paul Giamatti, that acting moment, was just so powerful to me. It's a real highlight in the film that came out this year because it's just so, it's so simple, and it feels so familiar, it feels so warm and just cozy to watch. This is like, next year I'll put this on as a Christmas movie, because I think it just fits so well, and it's so easy to just digest. It's funny, it's heartfelt, it does all those... It hits all those emotional beats you want a movie like this to hit, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. And not only that, but visually, cinematography and all that, this movie just looks very good. Like, the setting of like the late 60s, early 70s, whatever it was, is just such a great setting for a film, and it gives the scriptwriters a lot of interesting scenarios to write the characters into, and I think the setting is taken advantage of pretty well. But yeah, watch my The Holdovers video if you want more in detail thoughts. And now moving on to my number 5 spot. Coming in at my number 5 spot, I have Godzilla -1, and oh man, where to begin with this movie. I went to see this movie kind of almost on a whim, because Napoleon had just left IMAX and I was angry that a Godzilla movie had taken it. So I go to watch Godzilla -1 in IMAX, which was beautiful by the way, it looked great, and wow, that movie just blew my socks off. Everything about this movie is just so masterfully done, and it's just like pure artistry. It manages to make Godzilla scary again. It makes him a true threat. The human characters are actually really interesting. They're like on par with the Godzilla monster stuff. The score is excellent. The movie was made on like less than $20 million, which is insane, because Godzilla looks excellent in this movie. It's just, this whole movie surprised me. Because, you know, the last movie I saw with Godzilla in it was Godzilla vs. Kong, where they fight Mecha Godzilla. You know, in my mind, I haven't seen the original Godzilla movies, and I haven't seen Shin Godzilla, which I hear is really good. So in my brain, I just kind of think of Godzilla as another monster. But in this movie, they bring him back to those truly scary roots, and they set it right after World War II Japan. So everything is already destroyed, and Godzilla is like a third world war for the Japanese. It is just so cool, and I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's just so awesome. Like, there are certain moments in this movie that I remember like I saw the movie just today. I'm thinking of the first time Godzilla uses his heat beam, when they defeat Godzilla at the end, his first rampage through the city. I mean, even just the intro, where he's like a dinosaur, and it's just so... Godzilla being scary is so much better than Godzilla just being a big monster that can fight really well. Because scary Godzilla works. Like in this movie, he is frightening, and there are a couple like jump scare scenes with him that are genuinely pretty scary. And again, the human characters in this film are great too. And the story, especially from the main guy, is really compelling. You really feel for him. And then, since he was a Japanese kamikaze pilot, you see near the end of the movie where he's going with his story, and you feel so heartbroken, but you understand because it's that horrible messed up sense of honor in his head. And like, man, this movie just works. I loved it. I'm so happy that I've seen a good Godzilla movie in IMAX in theaters. But yeah, on to my number 4 spot.
Mahito.
So, you made it.
At number 4, I have Hayao Miyazaki's very own The Boy and the Heron. I mean, it's Studio Ghibli, and this is his first film since The Wind Rises, making a correction from my original video. And I mean, what can I really say about this film that I didn't already say? I mean, it feels too easy to compliment the animation for being beautiful, because of course it is. It's a Studio Ghibli film. And it feels too easy to compliment the writing, because of course it is. It's a Hayao Miyazaki film. You know, it's just, he's built himself up to such a crazy high standard. And the fact that he's kept that crazy high standard going is just unbelievable to me. Because by the time he stops making movies, he will probably have one of the best directorial sprees ever. Because, I mean, I don't think he really has a single stinker. I mean, like, maybe Ponyo. Maybe. I mean, you can barely call that a stinker to me. Like, his filmography is just so insane, and this movie is really just another excellent... I think this movie is on par, or maybe a little, just barely worse than Spirited Away. It takes everything that I love about Miyazaki. It takes that creativity, that ingenuity, that beautiful animation, the compelling story, those crazy concepts. It takes it all and it combines it into this beautiful, heartfelt film. And once this movie comes out on streaming, I'm gonna rewatch it in English. Just to... Have you seen the voice cast that movie has? I mean, this is just a great example of how good animation can get. And I mean, there's one more animated film later on this list that's another one of those, but when we get there, you know, I'm sure I'll be raving about it just like I am about this right now. But I mean, this is just an excellent Studio Ghibli movie. What isn't to like with this movie? Watch my video if you want to hear my more in detail thoughts. But yeah, on to my number 3 spot.
You know, you got nice color skin. What color would you say that is?
My color.
Coming in at the bottom of my top 3, I have to credit Martin Scorsese for his masterful Killers of the Flower Moon. I saw this in IMAX pretty much opening week. I was really excited to see this. You know, I'm a big fan of Scorsese, and seeing a film of his in theaters, in IMAX no less, 3.5 hours long, this was like a dream for me. So I went and I loved it. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio killed it, Robert De Niro killed it, Lily Gladstone killed it, Jesse Plemons killed it. I mean, everyone attached to this film just knocked their role out of the park. And I want to circle back on Lily Gladstone because I had never seen her in anything else before. I'd seen every other big name actor in at least one other movie or TV show before, but Lily Gladstone was a completely unknown to me. And for an actress of comparatively little popularity to basically star in a Martin Scorsese movie is just insane. And what's even better is that she's excellent in this movie. She really acts her heart out, and I mean, I loved her in this movie. And I can't wait to see what future projects she gets because of this big boost in her career. I mean, this movie it's horrible in the sense that it's a real story, so you know this all, at least loosely, really did happen. And I like the ending, not to spoil it, but when Martin Scorsese's cameo comes in, I thought that was a really cool way to end it. Just, it's such a harrowing movie to watch, and Leonardo DiCaprio, even though he plays like the main character, he is an evil, just rotten man. And Robert De Niro plays this equally evil, rotten man so well. And this whole movie, you're just following these horrible, horrible people, and you can't help but watch and just wait. Just bide your time to watch them fall. And I mean, those scenes near the end, like the court scenes, are just excellent. You just see this pure corruption finally be taken down by Jesse Plemons at the working for the FBI. I mean, it's just, it's such a horrible real story, but it was adapted perfectly by Scorsese. And like the visual art of this movie is just on another level. I mean, some of the most beautiful shots and clips and scenes I've ever watched with my eyes. I mean, I just love this movie, straight up. I don't think it's Scorsese's strongest by any means, but I still really enjoyed watching it. And I mean, just the fact that I was lucky enough to see a Scorsese picture 3.5 hours long in IMAX is just, I don't know if I'll ever be able to experience that again, and I'm just grateful I got, because this movie, I loved it. I can understand why you wouldn't, but I mean, I loved it. But now, on to my second place spot. Coming in at my number 2 spot, I have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I mean, how could I not put this movie on my list? This was the first movie I saw of the summer. It came out on my birthday. I saw it opening night. I mean, watching this movie in IMAX at like 10:30 at night is just an experience I wish I could relive every day, because it was just so insane. I was sitting there and it felt like I was on another planet watching this movie. It's so ridiculously detailed and so beautifully animated, and you could tell there's so much painstaking effort put into every nanosecond of this film that you can't help but, even if you don't care for the story, which is weaker than Into the Spider-Verse, even if you don't care for the characters, which are slightly more poorly written than Into the Spider-Verse, you can't ignore just how beautiful and just how risky it was to make a movie of this caliber. Because even though you have the backing of the Spider-Man IP to fall on, a movie this insane, it's just ridiculously, it's just unbelievable to me that a company as big as Sony allowed for a movie this long and this detailed to be made. This is like the 3rd longest Western animated movie ever made, or something like that. I mean, so many risks were taken with this film, so much time was sunk into this film, so much money, and to see it all pay off in this collage and just crash of beautiful designs and beautiful animation and excellent story and wonderful writing and awesome music. I mean, I just can't believe this movie actually got made. And you know, it sucks that it ends on a cliffhanger. And it's a shame that some characters aren't given the proper amount of screen time, but you can't ignore just how beautiful this movie is. I know I keep saying it, but every time you see a clip of this movie, you want to watch it all over again. I mean, there's just so much passion, so much emotion. This is such an important film for so many people, because Spider-Man is just like the most relatable superhero, and to see him go through a problem like this, to see him experience this level of hardship, I mean, it's just beautiful to watch. This movie is like the prime example of that stupid picture that says animation is cinema. I mean, sure, I completely agree, animation is cinema. But when you have these horrible examples being thrown out that people don't like, no one takes it seriously. But 1 in 1,000 times you get an Across the Spider-Verse that's just so unbelievably quality and just so beautiful, and you can't look away the whole time. I don't think I blinked watching this movie. I think I've said that for a movie already, but I mean, this movie, every second, you are just 100% locked in. And if you blink, you miss a cool animation Easter egg or something. I mean, this movie is, just like I said for my Mind Game review, this movie does what I love about animation and pushes the boundaries to an unbelievable extent just to show what the medium is capable of. And that's what I think animation should be used for. And now, for my favorite film of the year. And now, coming in at the top of my list as my favorite film of the year, releasing on July 21st, directed by Christopher Nolan, the one and only Oppenheimer. What more can be said about a movie of this magnitude? I went into this movie incredibly excited. I had not seen Cillian Murphy in very much, and I'd seen a couple Chris Nolan movies, and I am so happy to say that this movie wowed me beyond belief. I mean, the whole film is building to the bomb. I mean, there's no doubt about it. All the marketing, everything about this movie was the bomb. But the bomb manages to be only like the second or third most incredible, harrowing, disturbingly violent and beautiful scene in the film. I mean, the performances, the editing, the score by Ludwig, oh my god, the score. The sets, the special effects, the fact that none of it was CG. I mean, Chris Nolan, you know, I'm a fan of most of his films, but I think pretty safely this is my favorite film of his. Just the fact that the bomb and that the neurons and neutrons and atoms flying across Robert's brain were done practically is just unbelievable to me. And this does have to do with the fact that I saw it in 70mm. Yeah, I saw it in 70mm at the AMC Theater on City Walk, sure. But even if I saw it in normal IMAX, even if I watched it on my laptop right now, it's such a harrowing, gut-wrenching movie to watch. And there's this horrible, horrible downshift after the bomb, where everything just goes horribly for Oppenheimer. And watching this poor man crumble under everything. And I don't even know if calling him a poor man is really justified, because he was like a horrible guy. But I mean, it's such a fascinating biopic, and I love that it doesn't just focus on the historical stuff. You know, Oppenheimer's the guy who made the first nuclear weapon, yeah. But I had no idea about any of this personal stuff. I didn't know about any of this accusatory communist stuff. I mean, this movie just blew my socks off, literally. I mean, in that 70mm theater when that bomb goes off, I mean, I swear it shook my brain a little. It was just so intense and so beautiful, and it was just so much fun to watch. I mean, it has everything you could want from a motion picture of this size, and it gives me hope that the cinema experience and that true art in film isn't done for yet. You know, this movie made $1 billion, and it's a 3-hour biopic about a guy who died 60 years ago or something. It doesn't get much better than that for the health of cinema. And I mean, I can't say much more about this film. It's just an unbelievable mark in recent cinematic history. And honestly, when it comes to practical effects, I don't think another film will ever even come close to meeting what Christopher Nolan did for Oppenheimer, and for his character, and for his directorial style. I mean, I think this is Chris Nolan at his peak, and I cannot wait to see his next film, whether it's with Cillian Murphy or without. Oppenheimer sits pretty easily as my favorite film of the year, and even though I haven't seen some of the highly renowned films this year, I don't think that could even get close to changing. I loved this movie. I love Christopher Nolan. I love Cillian Murphy. I loved everyone involved with this film. It's just unbelievably good. And so that concludes my top 10 of 2023. Honestly, a wonderful year of film. I wish I'd seen more films. I wish I'd seen Blackberry. I wish I'd seen Air. I wish I'd seen Anatomy of a Fall. I wish I'd seen How to Blow Up a Pipeline. I mean, all of these movies I really wanted to watch, but they just weren't playing out here. And I'm sure at least one or two of those films would have been on my top 10 if I'd seen them. But I mean, even just the films I saw this year were just unbelievably great, and I'm happy that I just recently got into film this year and that I have been kind of easily led into the field with this great year of film. I mean, this video's probably over 30 minutes already, but I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed my top 10. Let me know if you would change any positions or anything. But I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the theaters.